This might sound a little strange, but I really want to tell you about this tattoo I have. It says, "Mighty glad you're here." And before I really get going for the day, I want to tell each and every one of you that I am mighty glad that you are here tonight listening to this talk. So the story of how I got this tattoo starts late summer 2019. It was the last day before teachers have to go back and start getting our classrooms ready for the coming school year. And I was out walking our dog, and I got this really ominous text message. It said, "All staff, please immediately check your email." And I knew, as I bet you would too, that it was that text message. Somebody had died. And I got home, and I took up my laptop, and I checked my email, and I was devastated. Because I don't know why, but I really kind of thought that it was probably some retired teacher who had lived this long and wonderful life and had passed away. But it wasn't. It was a student, my student, had taken his own life the night before. And I felt something that I hope you never feel. I mean, my first emotion was anger. Not at him, but at the way I found out. I run a small alternative high school program. It's about 4 dozen students, and they volunteer to be part of our school. And once they come in, I am their English teacher for the rest of high school. My wife is their math teacher. And our best friend is their history teacher. So we're like this little family, or at least we try to be. And while I didn't expect to be the first person that got called, I definitely didn't think I was going to find out in a mass email. But I'm kind of deflecting, because that wasn't the only reason that I was angry. See, my student who passed away in the fall of 2019, right before school started, he was transgender. And thinking about his death really made me re-examine my own journey and how I came to be part of a system that allowed something like this to happen. His name was Davin. He was a photographer. And he had this really unique perspective on things. And when he first came into the program, my wife and I were such mama bears. We wanted everybody to make sure that you were using his correct pronouns and his name, and that he could go into the bathroom that he needed to go into. And we would say to him, you know, this struggle right now just builds character, and it's going to get better. And we told him about our own struggles. I don't know about you, but I had a really hard time in high school. I went to high school in the 90s, and people had some words that they would use to describe me that I will not be repeating here. They were not very nice. And I used to go to my favorite teachers, and they would tell me, this struggle is going to build character. You're going to get through this, and you're going to be okay. They'd say, sticks and stones may break your bones. The thing was, those words really did hurt me. And one day, I went to my locker, and some of those words were scrawled on my locker. And I remember when I saw them, I took everything out of my locker, and I never used it again. And the school, to their credit, painted it over when I complained about it. I guess they were out of the original red paint, so they used this pink. And I bet it wasn't as a dramatic difference as I remember it, but to me, it was the loudest color in the world. And I carried everything in my backpack from then on, and whenever I would walk by that hallway and that pink locker, I would totally ignore it, block it hard. And one day, like 2 years after it happened, I was walking down the hallway with this girl that I had just met, and we were really hitting it off. And she said, "Do you know the story of the girl who owned that locker?" I said, "No," because I wanted to hear it, you know. And she proceeded to tell me these stories, honestly, like mythical proportions, the exploits of the girl who owned that locker. who actually, based on those stories, totally deserved the graffiti that was on there. It was actually at that moment that I decided I wanted to be a high school teacher. I hated high school so much in that moment. I didn't want anybody else to feel that. But all these years later, I was reading an email that Davin had taken his own life. I realized high school hasn't changed enough, and it's killing our kids. You know, Davin took his life in 2019. He was not alone. Suicide attempts among American teenagers are alarmingly high. 22% of teens have seriously considered taking their life in the last year. And among LGBT teens, that number is almost 3 times higher. But, and this is really important, I got the chance to talk to Davin's family about this talk. And the one thing that they were really afraid of was that anybody in this room would leave here tonight thinking that this was a talk about a trans suicide. It is not. It is a talk about how teenagers are feeling right now. Actually, what they really wanted me to remember was that the night before he passed away, he was so stressed about the school year starting. And he wasn't alone in that either. Actually, if you look at the statistical map, there is an uptick in suicide just before the start of the year all over the country. There's a term for this online. It's called the back to school necklace. We have developed a system that is so daunting to some of our young people that they would rather take their own life than spend another year in high school. I want to try something just for a minute, change gears a little bit. I want you to imagine if you had a lot of really important work to do, what would be your ideal working conditions? I know for me, I would need a really comfy chair, some quality lighting, some snacks nearby, a bathroom I could use when convenient, right? Now I want you to consider how much that list of things has in common with the average American high school classroom. It's not much. As a matter of fact, we ask these kids to act more like adults on a regular basis, but most of us as adults wouldn't last 40 minutes in the chairs that we ask them to sit in almost 7 hours out of the day. And you might be saying, yeah, but it's just 4 years. But 4 years to us feels a whole lot different. I mean, my students, by the time they graduate from our program, they've spent almost a quarter of their conscious lives with us. That's the thing about young people, about teenagers. The magnitude of the struggles that they're facing is really amplified by how short a time they've been alive. And that's why when they say things like, it's like a prison here, and we're kind of like, yeah, sure, it's like a prison. On your lunch break, go make another TikTok, right? But we should probably, a little bit, be listening to the fact that they feel that way. What if there was another way? I've actually been lucky enough to be part of something that gave me a whole different perspective on how we could be treating our young people. Every summer, my wife and I volunteer at a camp for kids with significant special needs in New Jersey. It's called Camp Fatima. And this really wise older volunteer, when I was first starting out there, she said to me, "You do know that they're not always going to be cute." I thought that was a weird question, but it's actually a really, really important question. See, all of the campers at Camp Fatima require one-to-one care. And I think when they're really small and cute, they remind us of babies. And it's like human nature to help them with their basic needs, right? They're having a tantrum, you try and calm them down. They're hungry, you feed them. They need to use the bathroom, you help them. But somewhere along the way, they look a whole lot more like adults. And adult-sized tantrums and adult-sized bowel movements are not as cute. But still, this very wise older volunteer told me to remember, those are still our children. And so we do. And camp is so much fun. Every camper, as they pull up on the campsite, whether they're the teeny tiny little ones that still look like babies or the ones that are even taller than I am and they have acne scars, we gather totally around their car and we sing the camp song to them. There's this one line of the camp song, and it goes like this. We welcome you to Fatima, we're mighty glad you're here. And we are. And while the campers are there, they get to hang out with their peers, and we keep them safe while they try new things and make art and music. Why isn't high school more like that? I mean, after all, we're after the same things for these high school students. We want them to be around their peers. We want to keep them safe while we push their boundaries, have them make art and music. You know, there was actually a time when it was totally okay to make fun of people like campers. Like they were the butt of a lot of jokes. In fact, some of them, they even locked them away in places. Nobody got to hear the art or the music that they were making until somebody said, no, stop that. I'm mighty glad to know this person. I think it's time that we did that for high school students. I think that there is another way. We could be singing to them. Not necessarily literally, like we could figuratively be treating them more like campers. You know, like some of our campers, Davin, he wasn't very cute anymore. He never wanted to do the activities that I had planned. He didn't want to participate in our group discussions. And sometimes when he would come into the classroom and I would say, good morning, he didn't even say good morning back. But looking back on it, I think that my good morning was probably filled with a lot of the fear I had for the way that the world was going to react to him. And I bet he knew that. And I shouldn't have put that on him. After he passed away, I went and I got this tattoo on my arm. I wanted it in a place where I would see it a lot, and it would remind me of all the days that I wish I had back to tell him how mighty glad I was that he had gotten to school that day. And to remind me that even the ones that aren't cute, we need to treat them like we're really, really glad that they made it to school. What's it going to take to really value student wellness in our design of secondary school experiences? For one thing, why does high school start so early? You know, there's this wealth of evidence that if you start high school later, you decrease self-harm. The state of California was so convinced by this evidence, they made it a law. High school in California can't start until 8:30 a.m. And you know what they found? After they implemented this, rates of self-harm went down, and test scores, if you're into those sort of things, totally went up. I teach in Massachusetts, where the average start time is 7:38 a.m. It is not the earliest in the country, thank you, Louisiana. But that is still like blisteringly early if you think about having to be like outside an hour before that waiting for a bus to show up. But a lot of times when I try and make the argument, hey, could we start high school a little bit later? Right away I'm met with, well, they could stop playing video games and go to bed earlier. Right, yeah. And the other thing I'm met with is, well, I went through it and I was fine. Were we, though? I mean, when I was in high school, I had so thoroughly internalized the version of me that was scrawled on that locker that I really hated myself. And truth be told, there were times where I thought about taking my own life. But I didn't. I didn't in large part because I was really looking forward to certain things, certain people who made me feel a certain way, certain jobs that I felt like I was really good at. I was doing stage managing for some plays. I was in the marching band. Sometimes I worry, like, what if the thing for some kid who feels just like I did is sports. I know that's a little bit of a loaded statement to make, but it's kind of important when we consider the decisions that we're making to think about stuff like that, and to maybe make those decisions not thinking about teenagers, but remembering that those are children. And we should still be treating them like they are our children. I know that some people are going to say, the things that I'm asking for, like expectation of joy at school, later start times, comfy chairs, those are going to make our kids soft. But I can honestly say, after losing one, I would much rather that he was here and soft than gone forever. And I think it's important to remember that these now soft teenagers someday are probably going to be the ones who take care of us when we are not very cute anymore. So, sometimes I wonder if we treat teenagers the way that we do, in part because we were treated that way one time. And that's what we do, right? We see that as a model, and we keep it going. But the other thing that we're really good at is breaking the cycle. And we could totally be the ones who break that cycle and treat teenagers differently. So how do we start? One thing is, let's treat high school students more like campers. Second thing is, if you're voting on issues that affect the high school life, the day-to-day life of high schoolers, things like start times and standardized testing requirements, sports, bathroom use, I want you to have in mind those children and not the kind of adult-sized pain in the neck that teenagers can sometimes be. I wonder what will happen if we put those changes into place. I have a prediction. I think that if we really treat high schoolers with that same amount of joy and enthusiasm, and we design the systems around them with them in mind that way, that they will grow into happy, healthy humans that we can hand the world to. And importantly, remember, they will turn around and take care of us when we are no longer cute. And I, for one, will be mighty glad to see it. Thank you very much.